very important for the investors, for the business owners, and for the people who look forward in towards Dubai or towards GCC. Well, today we are going to discuss about GCC. Well, if we all know about European Union, I think what I see from the articles and the news that GCC is going to become the next EU of the world. And why I say that and how it will prosper as better than EU even will be the discussion of the life today. So first of all, if I see EU, when it started after the war, after the world war, the EU was in a very different situation, not in a good situation. The cities were bombed, the countries inside the EU were not having much of the savings on the country level. The economies under the EU regime were broken. The technology, the coordinations were not great. All the countries, major countries under the EU fought World War. So all of them were badly affected. And if I speak about GCC, which has UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, all these countries. So the GCC was formed long ago. And if we see if GCC is going to become the EU, what is the starting point of GCC versus EU? It was for EU, it was a desperate move to make European Union so they can better prosper together. And they were starting almost from zero or maybe negative. But compare that to GCC, which is sitting on $2.5 trillion sovereign wealth, world class infrastructure in the cities, in the countries under GCC, aligned leadership, latest technologies, latest infrastructure, and have shared vision as well. So, this is by far a very important difference when we compare EU and GCC. GCC, I am saying, will be the next EU. So, I am comparing that EU was able to prosper with such negative sentiments and on ground economies, then GCC, which is already doing well, will prosper much better than EU. So when EU started, it literally converted the total EU economy into 18 trillion. Imagine what would GCC as a whole would be building in next coming years. Now let's see again in detail what was the EU did and what is the single odds against EU versus GCC. So if I again speak about the infrastructure, the reality of EU was roads gone, cities troubled, money zero, sovereign wealth, borrowing to survive, no political trust, languages, 24 different languages, decision speed very less because it was democrat. All the countries under EU are democratic. Technology again, pre-internet, pre-digital, everything was manual. Now compare that with current GCC situation. Lots of money, world-class infrastructure, aligned leadership. All the countries speak Arabic. It's monopoly, so it is not slow as democratic countries. Then current situation is most of the governments are running on AI, smart cities, and digital government. So the coordination would be much better, and for GCC to prosper even better than EU, the chances are much higher in terms of GCC performing. Now, same destination, completely different destination point. So, in terms of GCC being working as EU, is the goal, is the destination. But what is the starting point? It's very different. So, for EU, it was almost zero. For GCC, they're starting from $2.25 trillion in sovereign wealth, considering all the different sovereign wealth of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. Then, in terms of combined economy, also would be $2.1 trillion. Projects which are upcoming in specifically in Saudi Arabia, which is building the vision to the next level for the Saudi Arabia and the global perspective as well. So this is a big difference in terms of starting point. EU took 11 years just to remove trade tariffs. This is again one thing which is very important. GCC customs already is united and is working since 2003. So this is a big milestone because for EU it took 11 years to reach where GCC has already passed it. As I was speaking about Saudi Arabia NEOM project, EU rebuilt bombed cities. GCC is building new ones from the scratch. So no restoration, no renovation. A 500 billion city coming out from a desert in next 10 years. The EU never had those resources to do this. And when EU needed capital, it had to literally take it from the World Bank or other superpowers of the world. But GCC, when it requires, they have the capital already. They are riding the oil economy already. So that is by far a big differentiator why GCC would be even bigger than EU, and it is moving forward towards that. Now, some other comparisons in terms of speed. In terms of speed, EU timelines for no trade barriers were 11 years. In GCC 2003, already that has been formed. Free movement of people, it took 28 years for EU to come to that point. But GCC already launched unified tourist visa in 2023, and they are doing more things related to that. Common currency was formed in 40 after 42 years, which is euro. In terms of GCC, there is no common currency, but all the currencies out of six, four are pegged with USD already. So that's a big differentiator. Joint trade deals, decades of slow negotiation when it comes to EU, but GCC, in terms of GCC as a corporation, is already signing deals with major countries. Integrated capital markets, again, it took 30 years to build that, but GCC already has, again, it's a small market, but they're working integratedly. That is by far more important. Single business rule book, it took 40 years, but again, GCC is already riding that wave that where the countries are more aligned. So again, EU speed was slow because of the capital, because of the coordination and the political situation. But in GCC, it is not like that. The speed is the most important key, and the capital is already sitting there. Now, this is Ray Dalio, founder, Bridgewater Associates, one of the biggest hedge funds around the world. He says the biggest mistake investors make is not recognizing a new world order when it's forming in right front of them. So already, I think this, I would say, already biggest of the investors around the world have already seen that the GCC is going to be the next EU, and Dubai, UAE will the next financial capital. I think it's already there. That's why we have seen billionaires and millionaires moving towards UAE consistently from past 5 years, and they're exiting mainly UK and European region. Now, if GCC achieves even half of what EU has achieved, the numbers will be staggering. So, the GDP of EU would be $18 trillion. Projected for GCC is already 6 to 8 trillion dollars. Global trade share is 15%. For GCC, it's already 4% and it's heading towards 10%. So, all the numbers which I speak about, GCC will be a much bigger market because of its geography, because of its capital, and the speed of movement in terms of the policies. Now, we have spoken all good things about GCC, but there are some issues as well which I want to highlight as well. The EU had a massive advantage compared to GCC. That is it did not depend on one commodity, that is oil. GCC's revenue still depends 60 to 70% on oil. EU had zero oil dependency. Low oil for 5 years could slow down GCC as well. So that is the biggest risk, and that is why I think most of the countries under GCC have understood that, and that is why Saudi Arabia is building NEOM. Insane ambition project. It is opening its market for the real estate, for the businesses, for the tourists, everyone. Then the next issue which is there in GCC is the geopolitical issue, which is nearby countries are very sensitive, like Iran, Yemen, and other countries which are cross border to GCC. That is the second risk. Again, next risk would be execution under compression, which means you had 36 years to get it right. GCC compressing into that into 10. Speed creates error also. So because the number of people inside GCC are less, the speed is more, but we have to be very accurate about decisions because the number of people voting for GCC to moving in one direction are less. So these are the major risks which I say are there when GCC wants to overcome or overpower EU, but nonetheless the positives are much ahead. Now, last thing, then we'll end today's live session. EU versus GCC. EU started broke with and built 18 trillion dollar economy in 36 years and changed the world. Already proven model. GCC starting rich at $2.5 trillion, dollars, moving faster, windows are open, but still most investors have not noticed yet. So if you are looking at EU as a market, GCC will be a much bigger market, not just UAE, but the countries around it. So if you like today's video, if you have any questions, this will you can post it on our YouTube or LinkedIn. I would be happy to answer that. Hope you like today's live session. We'll see you soon in the next video. Thank you so much.